Today I'm talking to you guys about the differences between guitar strings and violin strings. A lot of people ask if there's similarities between the two or if they're the same. And while there are some similarities because they're both on chordophones, which is another way of saying a stringed instrument, they're ultimately different for a couple different reasons and a couple different ways. One way that they're different is that violin strings tend to be more like flat wound rather than round wound like guitar strings. And another big thing is that the scale length is a lot different. So on a guitar, it's usually like 25 to 26 and a half inch scale length, which means like that's like the length of the instrument. But on a violin, it's obviously much shorter because the violin itself is like a tiny instrument, right? So those are some big difference right there. And also, one thing that's really cool that I found out about violin strings is that I just realized this is shaking quite a bit. But anyway, one thing that's really cool is that I realized that you can actually buy catgut strings still, and I actually have a link to them in this article way down here. Got the catgut strings right here. Today I'm standing up at this stand-up desk, so it's like the table's like shaking a lot, But anyway, yeah, they actually do have catgut strings. Like they're like $100 or so, like $80 US. But yeah, these are like the traditional catgut strings. And in case you didn't know, like there was a point when most strings were made out of like sheep intestine. And they called it catgut, but it's actually like sheep intestine. But as you can imagine, like the tone is much warmer, and it's become kind of like a bougie thing, like now if you're like a concert violinist, maybe you got some extra cash and you like the warmth of the strings, you'll fork out the extra money for those strings. But I imagine most people use like the synthetic kind. They're using like a synthetic, like a steel, like wrapped in steel or whatever. But anyway, yeah. So they're different from each other in a few ways, and one way is that how they're set up. Like I just said, like the violins are much shorter, so the scale length is much shorter than guitars, and also like the way that the tension is on the string. So like there's more tension in guitar strings than there is on violin strings. So if you while you can put guitar strings on a violin, like it's gonna sound a lot different. In fact, I have a video linked in my article where a dude does just that. He puts guitar strings on his violin, and then he talks about like how it sounds. I recommend checking out that video. But another thing is that violin strings are generally much thicker. Like you can see the gauges right here. Like the gauges are like 0.66 for the G, which is the lowest string, and compared to the E, which is 0.46, and those are like light gauge strings, and for comparison's sake. And if you think about like the heaviest guitar string, generally it's like 52, right? Like 0.52, excuse me. So the violin strings are a little thicker than what you would see on a guitar. And as I said before, guitar strings are a lot longer as well. Unfortunately, I don't have the violin strings with me, but maybe someday I'll add to this video and I'll have like an actual physical comparison between the two. But as I said before, they're also flat wound, or they generally tend to be. You can see this image right here where like these are the flat wound strings and these are the round wound ones. So obviously the one is like much more flat than the other. And I think it's worth mentioning that they sound different. Like I've played flat wound strings before on my guitar, and like they're so different. They're the way they feel, the way they sound. Like they're warmer, smoother. They're warmer and they're smoother, and they're just the way they feel on your fingers. Like they're easier to play, but like it's not conducive to metal at all, But they do sound dope. They do sound dope for like any like jazz or like smooth like vibe, like chill vibe, In fact, I'll probably get a guitar just for flat wound strings someday. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of like the four things, Like the guitars and violins are set up differently. The violin strings are thicker, as you can see here in this image. And guitar strings are longer, and guitar strings are usually round wound in comparison to violins, which are flat wound. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this video. I guess I'll see you in the next one. All right, peace. Oh yeah, make sure you like and subscribe.